a radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Friday, August 30th. I hope everybody has had a fantastic week and looking forward to a great weekend. All right, we have a lot to talk about, a lot in the news. Some days are just, the news just falls out of the papers, I guess. I don't know. All right, a lot happening in the world. Let's start with Gaza. There's so many people out there convinced that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, that it is dedicated to the destruction of the Palestinian people, and it just wants to kill as many as possible and as quickly as possible. And of course, that is contradicted by the facts every single day in the way Israel is conducting the war. But one fact that contradicts that is that today, Israel announced it will halt all fighting in the Gaza for 3 days, I think, to facilitate the vaccination of all Gazan children with a polio vaccine, as one child was discovered with polio a few days ago. 1.2 million, I think, doses of the vaccines are brought into Gaza. Actually, I don't know. I mean, if you actually agree with RFK, and now I guess with the Trump campaign, maybe this is the way to kill all the kids in Gaza. I mean, I don't, because it's a vaccine. Vaccines are evil, according to some people out there. Anyway, all the kids in Gaza will be vaccinated over the next few days. There will be, I guess, some kind of ceasefire in the meantime while this is happening. I don't know, this is about as anti-genocide as one can imagine. Not that anybody who thinks Israel's committing genocide is going to be convinced by any fact. It's not a question of fact that bases their belief, or that anybody on the other side, so it's not going to change anybody's mind about anything, but it is a fact, and it is going on right now, and it is part of the news. All right, let's see. Why am I on the wrong page? There we go. That's better. There we go. That's starting. Yes, vaccines are definitely awesome. I already found the next conspiracy theory. I know I'm a endless fount of conspiracy theories. If I just let my mind go, there is no limit. There's no limit. All right. In the meantime, just one other thing going on in Israel right now. Israel yesterday, maybe it was the day before, went into the West Bank. The West Bank, of course, there are areas in the West Bank. This is the area that used to be controlled by Jordan before the 1967 war, and is the area in which the Palestinians want to one day establish a Palestinian state. Well, not really, because they want to establish a Palestinian state of all of Israel. But this is the area that international negotiators pretend that the Palestinians want to establish a Palestinian state in. Anyway, parts of this area are controlled by Israel on a regular basis, but parts of this area are really controlled almost exclusively by the Palestinian Authority. They have, in a sense, autonomy over this area. They are responsible for security, among other things, legal courts, land sales, all of that is the responsibility of the Palestinian Authority. By the way, if an Arab is discovered to have sold land to a Jew, the sentence is death. That is the law, rule of law, right? Anyway, this is the West Bank. This is the wonderful Palestinian Authority that is supposed to be the more moderate partner vis-a-vis Hamas. Anyway, terrorist activity is, or terrorist planning and terrorist training and terrorist hiding of terrorists occurs in these areas extensively, and Israel launched a significant operation to enter the areas of the West Bank that are under the control of the Palestinian Authority to try to destroy the terrorists that are there, to kill them, to destroy their infrastructure, to seize weapons, in a sense, stop terrorist attacks in Israel from happening before they happen. Because these are the terrorists that are most likely to be able to, post October 7th, to be able to enter Israel and commit terrorist activities inside Israel. So Israel's been operating in the West Bank the last few days. They killed the head of Hamas operations in Jenin, a big town camp in the West Bank. The head of Hamas, they killed him and some of his associates. They've killed other leaders of terrorist organizations within the West Bank. And hard to tell how long they're going to stay there and how long this is going to take, but they're actively engaged in operations. This is the biggest operation within the West Bank since October 7th. Since October 7th, Israel keeps going in, destroying infrastructure, killing some terrorists, and coming back out. This time, they really brought a lot of forces in and are spending a little bit more time and being a little bit more thorough in the destruction of the terrorist infrastructure. Hopefully, and I think this is basically to shore up the rear. I mean, the real danger is you have a war in the north and you have a war in Gaza, and then people in the West Bank are the ones who start committing the terrorist activities inside Israel. And they have, the West Bank, much of the West Bank is just minutes from major centers of population in Israel. Yes, there is a so-called wall or a fence, but walls or fences are easily breached. This is a way to keep them at bay. That is to, before it even starts, before it even happens, get at the leaders, get at the planners, get at as many of the troops and the people on the ground, and make it impossible for them to do anything. So that's what Israel is actively doing to try to stop any terrorist activities from happening, emanating from the West Bank. And my guess is they're going to be successful. The reality is that when Israel is aggressive, when Israel is in a sense, is the one initiating the action instead of just waiting for something bad to happen, then it manages to disrupt terrorist activity in such a way that it just stops. It's when Israel sits back, stops worrying, stops being aggressive, stops being concerned, it becomes complacent, that's when the terrorists strike. They sense the weakness, they sense the opening, and that's what they go for. And we certainly saw that on October 7th, but we've seen that throughout the history of terrorism and Israel. It's Israel's weakness that encourages terrorists. It's Israel negotiating. It's Israel seeming to lack resolution, to lack commitment to the fight that encourages terrorism. Same with the United States, right? It's America's weakness that encourages the bad guys in the world to act. All right, let's see. Oops, I don't want to do that. Let me see if this, I don't want to do that either. All right, I want to do that. All right, big story out of Brazil, and that is a conflict between Brazilian authorities, primarily a particular Brazilian Supreme Court judge, and Twitter and X. I mean, basically, the Supreme Court judge in Brazil has basically, over the last few weeks, started restricting the ability of certain voices to post on Twitter, on X. It has restricted opposition, has restricted speech, and has basically made it almost impossible for people to express themselves on Twitter. This is clear censorship committed by the Brazilian government, directly limiting the ability of X to do its job. Let me just see. I mean, there's a bunch of political opponents that have now been silenced, and this guy's a judge. He's a Supreme Court judge. I mean, what do you do when the judiciary is the one trying to silence everybody? It's the judiciary that is siding with the authoritarians. And that's what's going on right now in Brazil. It is the Justice Alexandre de Moraes who is basically shutting down any kind of opposition voices, any political opponents, specifically on Twitter. I think in all social media. What is happening is that, Twitter is saying no. We are not going to take down these voices. We are not going to succumb to that. Basically, this judge has demanded that Twitter comply. He said he would basically arrest whoever worked for Twitter in Brazil. So Twitter fired everybody who worked for it in Brazil. So Twitter has no representative of the company in Brazil, so that this judge doesn't have anybody to arrest. Now the judge is saying, since you don't have anybody in Brazil, then you're not a legitimate company in Brazil, and we're going to shut you down. So Twitter will be shut down probably today in Brazil, it's good to know that Twitter, in this case at least, is standing up for the free speech rights, for the ability of people to express themselves on Twitter, and is standing up to a government, an authoritarian thug in government, trying to silence them and trying to shut down the platform. This is a judge that has, of course, he couldn't do this without the support of President Lula. President Lula is a leftist authoritarian, they are basically censoring. They're censoring opposition in any way that they can. Brazil really hasn't had this level of censorship, this level of attempted censorship at least, since the military regime ruled Brazil starting in 1964 for 21 years, so from 64 until 85. Lula's really bad. I mean, I remember Lula, this is his second round as president. The first time, he lost an election to Bolsonaro and then was put in jail, or maybe he was put in jail before he lost, before his successor lost to Bolsonaro. But I remember Lula being handcuffed and put into a police car and tried and put in jail, and then basically the Brazilian unbelievably corrupt Supreme Court ruled that it was an illegitimate conviction and freed him from jail, which allowed him to run against Bolsonaro this last time, and he won. But Lula is about as corrupt as any politician in the world out there is. And the Brazilian Supreme Court, I think, has been for a long time, forever maybe, but certainly today is a completely corrupt and worthless institution. One of the things that this judge in the Supreme Court has done, and remember, judges in Brazil, like France, judges under the continental system, not the Anglo-Saxon system, but the continental system, judges have a lot of power. They are not just there to procedurally, sit in trials and listen and rule. They are activist judges. They actually are engaged in the cases. Their mission is to seek the truth, is to go out there and engage in discovery and engage in what actually happened, and they are semi-legislatures. They could actually issue decrees and force companies and individuals to behave in particular ways. Anyway, in this case, the judge, one of the things the judge has done, because Twitter has said no, Twitter refuses to cooperate, is that the judge has now frozen Starlink, which is now related to Twitter. It's related to SpaceX, which happens to be an Elon Musk company, but it's not the same corporate entity at all. Anyway, he has frozen Starlink's finances and is preventing Starlink from conducting financial transactions in that country. Now, it turns out that about 250,000 Brazilians or Brazilian institutions, Brazilians, use Starlink for their internet service. This includes the military, the Brazilian military. It also includes schools. It includes a lot of people in the Amazons, where there is no other infrastructure for getting internet but Starlink, which is the connection with satellites, satellite internet. In the Amazon, Starlink is providing internet service. Anyway, all of these are supposedly going to be cut off, right? Because this guy is trying to get at Elon Musk. By the way, the feud has become personal. So Elon Musk keeps tweeting all kinds of memes and calling this judge evil, which strikes me that he is. The judge is attacking Elon Musk personally, not just Twitter and X as a corporate entity. It's become very personal. So the judge is now going after the other asset or the other income stream that Elon Musk has in Brazil, which is Starlink. So Starlink cannot, what this means is that Starlink now cannot charge its customers in Brazil because they've cut off its financing, right? Because that's the only thing that they can do against Starlink. They can't cut the wires. They can confiscate the dishes, I guess, but then they'd have to go house by house, and that would not be popular among Brazilians. They don't want to do that. So they basically do what a lot of authoritarians do, right? And what the American government does and what the Canadian government has done, right? They cut off your finances. And so what they've done is made it impossible for people to actually pay for the Starlink service. So Elon Musk, to his credit, has basically said, look, this is horrible, that what the government is doing. He writes, many remote schools and hospitals depend on SpaceX's Starlink. SpaceX will provide internet service to users in Brazil for free until this matter is resolved, as we cannot receive payment but don't want to cut anyone off. So again, Elon Musk is fighting back. I love this. I mean, this is the Elon Musk we all, I think, should admire, that gains enormous amounts of respect. This is the heroic Elon Musk who stands up to political authority and political force. This is Elon Musk that is heroic, that is the good guy. There's no question about that. I don't know exactly how this resolves. I guess the issue with Starlink, it will be sued in the courts because there's actually no basis for the government to go after Starlink. So I think they will go after it in the courts. But again, what happens when this is appealed to the Supreme Court, and on the Supreme Court, there is a judge who actually issued the order. I don't know how that works in Brazil. Maybe, I guess the other Supreme Court justices can override him. Would they? The whole system is, again, I think the key word is corrupt. And one can hope that what Musk is doing will maybe awaken the Brazilians. Because at the end of the day, the only way to facilitate any kind of real change in Brazil is going to happen from within Brazil. I mean, nobody's going to paratroop change into the Brazilian society and into Brazilian politics. What I'm hoping is Elon Musk standing up, Elon Musk sticking a finger to this judge and to the Brazilian system and to Lula, the president, maybe will awaken that pro-liberty, pro-freedom spirit that I've seen in Brazil many, many times when I visited there, that I think exists in large measure in Brazil. And it's up to Brazilian people to awaken. It's time for them to go out into the streets as they've done many times over the last, 12, 15 years, and demand change, and demand that these bastards. I mean, they're going to lose Twitter. I think a lot of people in Brazil value Twitter. I know I have a lot of following. If I look at my followers on Twitter, I have a significant number of them from Brazil. And hopefully they will demand Twitter, they'll demand Stalin gets connected again, and they will demand that this judge and ultimately this president get kicked out. The judge should definitely be kicked out. Lula, we might have to wait for another election. And part of this is, I'm hoping that the Brazilians can resurrect kind of a spirit of freedom and liberty that predates Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro, as I've said many times on the show, I think corrupted that spirit. He refocused the energies on his mindless, populist, conservative agenda. And there was a real energy behind people who really believed in freedom and liberty in Brazil. And maybe that can be resurrected. And maybe Elon Musk modeling what it's like to stand up to authority. Of course, he's doing it from the safety of being in the United States. Maybe that can stimulate the Brazilians into more action. And I'd say one other thing. That plus the existence of Milei next door, which poses this dramatic contrast to Lula. Lula is a committed socialist, Milei a committed free marketer. Lula driving, I think, Brazil towards socialist authoritarianism. Lula driving them into socialist authoritarianism. Milei driving Argentina towards greater freedom, economic and hopefully in other ways as well. So I think that model, it probably doesn't have much sway globally and internationally, but I think Milei has influence and sway when it comes to South America. South America is relatively small. Everybody follows everybody else. I mean, it's big in terms of the population, but it's one geographic area. They don't share the same language because Brazil is Portuguese and everybody else is Spanish, and everybody who speaks Spanish pretends they don't know Portuguese, and the Portuguese pretend they can't understand Spanish, even though if they made the effort, it's not, I believe it's not that hard to figure the other language out. The cultures are different, but everybody follows it, and everybody follows everybody else's politics, and everybody's following Milei in Latin America. There's no question. When I was in Chile, what they wanted to talk about was Milei, and I'm sure, knowing what's going on in Brazil, that everybody is following Milei. Let's hope that that serves as an inspiration so that the next time there's an election in Brazil, which unfortunately is still a few years away, that Milei's inspiration carries the day. I don't know how you get rid of judges in Brazil. That's a good question. I don't know if it's by election or if they're appointed by the president or by Congress, or what is the exact process by which this happens. But let's hope they'll find a way to get rid of this real evil judge and generally maybe to replace the Supreme Court's Brazil with people who are more pro-freedom. All right, talking about politics, Trump took an interesting turn yesterday. Just to show and just to prove to everybody, just in case somebody was wondering, that he doesn't really have any principles, that he doesn't really believe in anything, and he's willing to turn his back on really anybody, even people who've been pretty loyal to him, if he believes that will get the job done, which means primarily him getting elected, or even, I think, deeper, him being liked. Trump yesterday became a massive advocate for women's fertility and women's right over their body and the whole shebang. In a pretty amazing turn of events, Trump yesterday at a big rally basically declared that not only was he pro-IVF, but that he was going to commit that a Trump administration would actually make IVF treatments free. The government was going to fund them. And if he couldn't quite do that, then he would find a way to force insurance companies to cover the full cost of IVF. In other words, one way or another, Trump was going to make IVF free to anybody who wanted it. I mean, this is after many Republicans believe IVF is murder. There was the whole Alabama situation that we covered a few months ago. IVF is one of the core issues of the pro-life groups, that the evangelicals that support Trump are very anti-IVF. And, you know, for those of you wondering whether maybe Trump is a free marketer, pro-free markets, Trump is now going to create a new government program with new government spending to either provide IVF for free, or if he can't get that past Congress, or if that doesn't work, then he will use government coercion to mandate that insurance companies provide IVF for free. Now, fine. I just think it's funny, right? We all have known that Trump is a complete pragmatist and he doesn't believe in anything. It's just fun to see it when it happens. Now, is Kamala Harris a complete flip-flop? Of course. I mean, all politicians are. But what's happening here is that Trump is flip-flopping against the main group that got him elected in 2016, the main group that almost got him elected in 2020. He's basically taking the number one group that supports him, evangelical Christians who are pro-life, and basically stabbing them in the back. And if that wasn't enough, that is his IVF thing, then he came out and said also, basically, he was asked, how would he vote in Florida? Florida has a constitutional amendment to the Florida Constitution that would make abortion, give women a right to abortion, up to viability, which is, right now the law is 6 weeks and up to viability. So he was interviewed on that, and Trump basically said 6 weeks is too short. He wants it to be longer. He would definitely advocate for longer. And he implied that he was going to vote for the constitutional amendment to the Constitution of Florida. Now, that's even a bigger deal than IVF for the pro-life movement. I mean, basically what Trump has done, and look, I think this is wonderful. This is fantastic if you actually believe that Trump would follow up on this. But this is amazing. Basically what he's done is he's eviscerated the pro-life movement. Trump has basically stabbed them in the back. He's gone to the heart of, he basically is the guy who got rid of Roe versus Wade. He is their guy. And then he says, nah, I'm going to support abortions through viability. I mean, great. I am thoroughly happy that both political parties now are basically pro-abortion. I mean, they still have some differences in terms of the specifics, but the Florida law not only would allow abortion up to 13 weeks, I think, or up to viability, but also has all kinds of exceptions for afterwards. So it's not this amendment to the Constitution is not bad. It's not as pro-abortion as I would like, but that's fine. It's pretty good. And which basically both political parties now support it. When J.D. Vance was asked, and J.D. Vance again is an adamant pro-lifer, supposedly, when J.D. Vance was asked what the president would do, what Donald Trump would do, if Congress passed a ban on abortion, a federal ban on abortion, he was asked what would the president do? And he said, quote, he would not support it. If you're not supporting it as president of the United States, you fundamentally have to veto it. Vance said, I think he would. He said that explicitly, that he would. So Trump would veto a national ban on abortion. So, I think this is brilliant politically. He's, in one sense, he's taken abortion off the table. Abortion is no longer an issue in America. Basically, both political parties agree on the issue of abortion. The real question now is going to be, his most passionate supporters have been pro-lifers. And how are they going to respond to this? Now, granted, most of them will probably keep voting for him because what's the alternative to vote for Kamala? But are they going to be as passionate? Are they going to be as riled up? Are they going to be as dedicated to going out and getting the vote out for him? I don't know. It's going to be really, really, really interesting to watch how this evolves. Already, at least on Twitter, people posting that Trump said this. You could see a lot of pro-lifers saying, I'm done, I'm just not going to vote. I mean, you could see a lot of deflating from the real committed pro-lifers. I mean, for a very long time in American politics, really since Reagan, really before Reagan, because Reagan made it, Reagan was responding to this, but really since the mid-1970s when the evangelical movement became active in the post-Jimmy Carter years, so post-1976, many within the evangelical movement became politically active around one issue, and that was abortion. They were committed to that issue, and that's the issue they ran on. And that animated a lot of people on the right. It animated a huge movement on the right, particularly men, but also some women. And to them, getting rid of Roe v. Wade was a huge victory. But in many respects, it was just the beginning. Because in many respects, what they really want and what they've really advocated for is a national ban. So Roe v. Wade, getting rid of Roe v. Wade, opened up the possibility that Congress now could pass a law that basically banned abortion, and that the Supreme Court would have no basis to rule against it. And then, of course, at the state level, they fought and succeeded in many red states to ban abortion almost completely. In some states, literally completely. But this is their issue. This is what they care about. This is what they fight for. This is what they rally around. This is what they go door-to-door knocking. This is what you see, the fanaticism, right? And Trump has basically walked away from that, and that's going to be fascinating. And because so much of MAGA and so much of its support is based on personality worship, the question becomes, how many of the MAGA will now say, well, of course, abortion should be permitted until viability. Well, of course, this has always been our position. That is how much of MAGA, how much of those pro-lifers are going to shift because Trump shifted. And if that happens, I don't know, maybe something good will come of Trump. Maybe that'll be the best thing. That will literally be the best thing Trump could have done. The best thing to come out of Trump running for president will be convincing, or not convincing is the wrong word, moving his, Republican supporters to stop being so anti-abortion. Of course, they've shown themselves to be mindless personality worshippers. So the real risk always now is who's going to be next, who is going to follow Trump, who is going to capture their imagination as their savior in the future. And what's that person going to think about abortion? But at least for a while, we might get some reprieve from the crazy nuts on the pro-life side of the political spectrum, they have been just, what do you call it when you cut somebody's legs from under them? They've just had their legs cut out from under them, and Trump did it. Yay for Trump! I'm ready to congratulate Trump, and to really, yeah. I mean, again, if this is what happens, if this stops being an issue on the right, that is, if or becomes a weak issue on the right, then having Trump as the Republican nominee was worth it. Wow. I never thought I would say that, but there you go. I mean, this is that big of a deal. I think it's a huge deal. And it's going to be interesting to see how the response comes in. All right. So I think the pro-life movement is going to shrink significantly. All right. Let's see. Before we get to China, let's see. What do we? Oh yeah, Kamala. Kamala yesterday had her first debut interview before a reporter from CNN. She brought Tim Walz with her, although he, for the most part, sat pretty quietly aside and played his role as, actually, I don't know as what, as the quiet, wise man. I don't know. I mean, he just sat there mostly. So Kamala was asked a lot of questions. It was her first interview. I think she's, she came across as, what did she come across as? As a good politician. She wasn't shrill. She wasn't whiny. She was straight. She wasn't emotionalistic. She didn't play identity politics. That was great. That was the best part of the whole interview. The best part of the whole interview is the fact that she didn't play identity politics. So she basically says, I'm not going, when she was asked about her being black and stuff, it's just, I don't want to talk about this. And when she was asked about the fact that she would be the first women president, she wasn't interested. She said, I want to be chosen because of my qualifications, that, I want to be president for all Americans or something like that, right? Perfect. I mean, she's distancing herself from identity politics. She's distancing herself from that. Now, again, this is an act. Everything about politicians and everything certainly about Kamala Harris is an act, but it's a good act. It's an act in the direction we want, which is towards the center and away from the crazy, the wacky left. On issues, for example, on fracking, she was pushed about whether she was going to stick by her pre-VP position of wanting to ban fracking, and she said absolutely not. She would not ban fracking. Of course, she has to say that or she loses Pennsylvania, but I think being VP at a time where energy prices went all over the place, she knows the reality of the United States of America. There's no way you ban fracking if you want to survive politically and if you want the economy to be successful, even partially successful enough so that you can survive politically. So she came out for fracking. She said she hadn't changed her values, but now she has practical experience. She thinks this is necessary, right? Required. She basically avoided answering a bunch of questions, even when she was pushed, and even when Tim Walz was asked, "Could you answer this question?" He didn't answer the question. So they're very good at avoiding questions, not answering them, and being all over the place. But that is par for the course. Overall, look, you have to judge these things. She didn't come across as crazy. She didn't come across as a crazy leftist. She came across as a centrist Democrat who is politically attuned enough to avoid the tricky questions and not answer them. She still has to learn how to not, if I was giving a media training, which I think she needs, she has to learn how to give more succinct, short answers. She meanders. She says vacuous meaningless things. But she's not, well, I mean, the contrast with Trump will be, we will see that when they debate on September 10th. With mics muted, by the way, muted mics. Kamala won that one, it seems. Or no, sorry. Trump was advocating for muted mics. So he won that. Kamala wanted open mics. Trump wanted muted mics. Or put it this way, Trump's team wanted to mute Trump. So they wanted muted mics. It will be with no audience. So that, I think, is Kamala won. So it's a mixture. She does have a tendency to go into word salads when she doesn't want to say anything. She doesn't say anything. But she doesn't say anything in very long sentences or long paragraphs without saying anything. So we will see. She is wishy-washy, and she does appear wishy-washy, and she is wishy-washy. She doesn't really believe in anything. She is a pragmatist, at least within a certain scope. She's not as outrageously pragmatic as Trump, who really doesn't care about truth, facts, evidence, reality. She is more a traditional politician, I'd say, a traditional Democrat. She wants you to believe she is a Bill Clinton or maybe an Obama. If you believe Obama was a centrist, which he wasn't, he was quite left. But today, I think relative to the far left identitarian politics, he is a centrist. I think she wants you to believe she is the same. Is she or isn't she? I don't know. I think she is. And my basis for arguing that she's probably a centrist is her time as a prosecutor. And as a time as a prosecutor, she prosecuted as a Democratic centrist. Her time as a senator, she was a leftist. She was an Elizabeth Warren-like leftist. Which one really represents who she, I think, really is? I think the prosecutor probably does more. That's a real job. Being senator is more theater, and it's more about setting yourself up to run for president, which she, of course, did. So I believe the prosecutor more than I believe the senator, but, you know, it is what it is. Anyway, she completely supported Biden's economic program and argued for it. And she followed up on she continued her view that inflation was at least partially caused by price gouging and all of that nonsense. On economics, she's a complete and utter loser. Of course, so is Trump. So we're part of the course there. On economics, they're both losers, complete and utter ignorant losers. And both unbelievably damaging. And again, yesterday I did the economic ranking of their programs, and Trump trumps Harris in terms of bad economic policy, because with his tariffs, that is the worst economic policy one can imagine, and his deportation. Those are the two worst ones you can imagine. But Harris is not far behind. So they're competing to a very, very deep bottom in terms of hurting our economic liberty and our economic wealth, our economic success. All right, I think that's what I have to say about Kamala's interview. I'm looking forward to this debate. I think it's going to be a blast. It's going to be really funny. I mean, Trump is funny. He's so absurd and so ridiculous, and he's getting worse. If you follow the media has stopped reporting what he tweets or truths. I don't know. Does it count if it is a tweet if it's not on Twitter? But he is. But if you follow those, once in a while, somebody will just post everything that Trump has done in a particular morning, said on his feed in a particular morning. Trump is completely and utter nuts. He's just unconnected to reality in a way that no presidential candidate in American history has been. He is conspiracy theories. He quotes QAnon. the absurdities of the stuff that he says are so outrageous and so bizarre that by any standard, by any measure, he should be disqualified from the presidency. I mean, the only measure that counts is what the voters do, and the voters don't want to disqualify him, obviously. And as I said, maybe that'll turn out well with regard to abortion. But the guy's nuts. The guy is not sane. Well, I mean, he's 78 years old. He was bad 8 years ago. He's much worse now. He's just not with it. And his number two is J.D. Vance. It's just a scary 1-2 punch. Very scary. All right, we've been talking about this. Oh, I'm going to skip that. Okay, we've been talking about this for quite a while, but it's worth constantly repeating because constantly people keep. I mean, this is in the news constantly. The threat that is China. China is this mighty industrial powerhouse. Mighty is this competitor to the United States. This mighty industrial engine, and people admire China, and people are afraid of China, and China's going through really, really, really difficult economic times right now. China's economy is really being pummeled. And there's very little discussion of this. I mean, we need to put tariffs on China because China's going to do what to us? China is really struggling, much worse than we are, in real terms. And remember, any numbers coming out of China are suspect in terms of GDP. Oh, we just reported GDP growth in the United States. So you remember the jobs numbers, 800,000 fewer jobs were created than what was initially reported. Well, it turned out GDP growth was better than what is initially reported. So these things, instead of 2.8, the economy grew in, I guess, the first quarter, 3%. That's pretty damn good. 3%, that's on an annual basis, not in one quarter, 3%. It's, given the economy, given the debt, given the growth of government and regulations and everything else, the U.S. economy probably can grow much faster than 3%, given everything that's going on, given the role of government in the economy today. It didn't grow any faster under Trump. And this is about how fast it can grow. This is the upside. And unless coming out of a recession and things like that. But it could grow much, much faster under freedom, but we don't have freedom. China's claiming 5% economic growth, but nobody believes that. It's probably significant below that. But that does not really show what's actually going on. We have huge deficits and a real debt problem, particularly at the federal level in this country. China's is much bigger. China's non-financial debt to GDP ratio is 300% right now, which is nuts. This is not something that they can pay off. This is not something they can easily deal with. Indeed, they basically told their state government, their provincial governments, sell everything. And indeed, that's what they're doing. They're trying to sell everything in order to reduce their debt. Much of this debt is held by cities and counties and provinces and whatever they call them in China. So much of this debt is held by what we would consider state and local and county governments and city governments. But it's still debt that has to be paid somehow. And it is slowing down economic growth. It is restricting where money flows, and it is unbelievably destructive to the Chinese economy. And China's in real trouble. Not pretend trouble, real trouble. Right now, the situation, for example, with the real estate market is so bad. So many Chinese homeowners are underwater. That is, they owe more in their mortgages than the value of their homes. And they're walking away from homes. That China is considering the government, in a sense, subsidizing a massive refinancing of of mortgages. They're talking about $5.4 trillion, not yuan, dollars, to refinance mortgages all over China, which they hope will then give Chinese households breathing space, because they'll write down their mortgages, their payments will be much lower, and then they'll be able to go out, hopefully, according to the Chinese, and spend money because they want to increase consumption. What this basically says is a lot of the mortgage banks, the banks that finance these mortgages, are basically bust without this massive government bailout. We thought the government bailout of 2008 was big. It's nothing in the United States. It's nothing as compared to what the Chinese are going to be doing now. So they're basically, the central bank is basically going to lower mortgage costs, basically subsidize the complete refinancing of homes in China. At the same time, office buildings in China are sitting empty. Now, in America and Western Europe, a lot of office buildings are sitting empty because of remote work. But remote work is not that popular in China. Most of these businesses are sitting empty because of the economic slowdown, because companies are not hiring, because there's massive unemployment among, working age adults, particularly young adults. Kids coming out of college cannot find jobs. Office vacancy rates in Beijing, Guangzhou, Shanghai, and even Shenzhen, which is like the hub of tech in China, the growth city. They're higher now than they were in June 2022. June 2022 was in the peak of Chinese nationwide lockdowns. If you remember, they locked down whole cities. Rents are 10% lower than they were 2 years ago in 2022. And this is not, as I said, this is not because of remote work like it is in, London and San Francisco. This is all about economic slowdown, not hiring, companies not growing, companies shrinking, holding back, restraining. Not good, not a good sign for economic growth. So the bottom line is, while China remains a real national security threat, even there I think it's overstated, because China is too poor to really engage with war with America. It's just too poor. If you look at a per capita GDP in China, it's still a poor country. Certainly relative to Europe and the United States and Japan and South Korea, it's a poor country. GDP per capita, the wealth of the individuals in China. It has a robust middle class that don't want to become poor, even in their own terms. Does China really want to go to war and risk losing that war, risk losing lives, risk spending gazillions of dollars, risk destroying its own infrastructure, at the risk of all these middle-class people then blaming the government for all this? Unlikely. So I think war with China is very unlikely. But still, it's got a large nuclear stockpile. It's definitely preparing for an attack on Taiwan. It is building up military capabilities. It's building up military capabilities that the United States needs to match and needs to be able to address. All of that is unbelievably true. But I think it is a crucial mistake to view China as this superpower on the rise, gonna beat everybody, is, robust economy, is gonna crush us economically, gonna funnel all that money into its weapons system, and just going to crush the West. It's just not happening. It's just not happening, and not unlikely to happen, because it's struggling economically and going to continue struggling economically. And I've predicted this, 5-6 years ago, when I first figured out how bad Xi was. I predicted this. Authoritarianism doesn't work. The immoral is the impractical. The immoral in politics is impractical. And the consequence of his authoritarianism, his consequence of his going after the tech industry, is the consequence of him centralizing everything, or centralizing a lot of science and tech and guiding science and tech, is going to be and the idea of growing economically at all costs. That is, not growing economically, growing GDP at all costs. GDP can grow if you just throw money at certain projects. If you pay a bunch of people to dig holes and fill them back in, GDP will grow. And that's what the Chinese have done. And they're paying the consequences for that. And this is predictable. And nothing's changed. That is, the mentality of the Chinese has not gone, of the Chinese leadership has not gone, oh, okay, so it turns out we should have known this, but it turns out statism doesn't work, socialism doesn't work, central planning doesn't work, we should move back towards free markets. That is not what's happening in China. And as a consequence, that is not, China's not going to be an economic threat. It's not going to be it's not going to be this all-powerful economic entity out there that is somehow going to screw America. I mean, it can't anyway, because all it does with America economically is trade, which is win-win, which is much more fundamental. But it's struggling in every respect. And we need to stop viewing it as somehow successful, because when we view it as successful, we want to emulate it. And much of the Biden and Trump agenda regarding tariffs, regarding industrial policy, bringing manufacturing home, all of that is based on this notion that they have all the good jobs. They manufacture stuff we don't. They have it right and we've got it wrong. It's just not true. We're both screwed. They are much more screwed than we are. And if we want to fix our problems, it's not by imitating an economy that is more screwed up than our economy is. So stop the subsidies, stop the central planning, stop the industrial policy, stop bringing manufacturing jobs home. We don't need them. Stop this mimicking of China. It got us into trouble during COVID, and it will get us into trouble economically. They are a disaster economically because they subsidize, because it's top down, because they have industrial planning, because they want to manufacture everything for the world instead of letting it be organic. That is, let the market drive these decisions. If we adopt their policies, we will become as bad as they are. And we don't want that. We don't want to be poor like them. And we don't want to have an economy that's as sick as their economy, as bad as our economy is. And it's got real bad points. As sick as our economy is, and it is sick, and it's getting sicker, and there are lots of problems. We talk about them on this show. We'll talk about them more, I promise. China's in a much, much worse situation. We don't want to mimic anything that they do. Indeed, we want to do the opposite of what they do, particularly under this regime in China. All right, let me just do a few thanks because I saw some money come in. Troy, thank you. Troy just did 500 Australian dollars. Really, really appreciate that. And I look forward to meeting you in Brisbane in December, Troy. That will be cool. And I saw that Wes did $50. Thank you, Wes. Really, really appreciate that. Mary Aline, thank you. And we got a few. I thought we had, Alan, thank you. These are stickers. Gail, thank you. Alex, thank you. I think that covers the stickers. All right. I wanted to do that before we kind of missed it. And again, thank you, Troy, basically getting us almost to the 3-hour goal. So you guys have to do the rest of the heavy lifting from here on. All right, let's finish up some additional items on the news. And here's the one that I think, this is, I don't know how this isn't really the number one issue, at least when it comes to the Middle East. This should be the number one issue that concerns everybody. Not Gaza, not Hezbollah, not anything going on in the Middle East except this one issue. and that is Iran's ability to build nuclear weapons. Because once Iran has nuclear weapons, all bets are off. I mean, then you're talking about the potential for World War III. Then you're talking about real potential for nuclear weapons bombs to be flown all over the place. Then you're talking about Armageddon. Everything else is child's play. It's insignificant in comparison. Iran with nukes, they could wipe out 10,000 people in a day, 100,000 people in a day. So, I mean, all this counting bodies here and there, I mean, it's all irrelevant if Iran gets nukes. Iran is not a normal country. It is not a rational country. It is not motivated by rational motivations. It's not motivated by reason. How about that? Iran is a theocracy, motivated by a group of crazy people at the top who believe that they are the messengers of God and that their job on earth is to bring Sharia to the world. And while they're not going to eagerly drop nukes, they will use those nukes to blackmail everybody around them, to try to increase their influence and to destroy as much of the West as they can. And this will not just be Israel's problem. This will be America's problem and Europe's problem, and ultimately it'll be Russia's problem and China's problem. It's not like Pakistan, which is somewhat Islamist. Nukes that are kind of quiet, they're buried somewhere, nobody talks about them. Pakistan is not directly ruled by mullahs. It's not directly ruled by complete and utter fanatics who believe in the 72 virgins somewhere. It's not ruled yet by a suicide ideology. Now, it could be any day, and we should worry about Pakistan's nukes. And I really, really, really hope that somebody in the Pentagon has a plan of how the US can go into Pakistan and dismantle those nukes if needed. Because the last thing in the world we want is for Islamist regime in Pakistan to be wielding those nukes freely. I don't know that anybody in the Pentagon has such a plan. But you know, some of us can hope. We know what should be done. Anyway, by all accounts, Iran is continuing to expand its stockpile of near-weapons grade uranium and has accelerated that trend in recent months. The Iranians are in a better place right now to produce a bomb than they've ever been. Indeed, by some accounts, it would only take them, 2 weeks? 2 weeks, I think, to produce, 2 weeks to convert what they have, which is 60% enriched uranium, into weapons-grade 90% uranium. And once they have the 90% material, I think they have a bomb. There's no reason to believe they don't have the technology to take that uranium and deploy it in a bomb. They have ballistic missiles. They have ballistic missiles buried deep in mountains. Much of Iran is mountains. One of the reasons it's not that easy for the Israelis to take out all the ballistic missiles that the Iranians have is that they're in the mountains. But 2 weeks it would take them to enrich that uranium and turn them into a nuclear weapon. They won't use them like that. Again, they'll use them to blackmail. It is such a catastrophe on such a scale, and I have no idea why everybody is sitting on their hands. And here I will point to my, second favorite villain right now in the world, maybe my number one villain in the world, Wyatt 516, who I guess has taken over from Scott or wherever to be here as a Trump spokesman, says Harris will use diplomacy. Yes, she will. But what will Trump use? Diplomacy. What did Trump do to eliminate Iranian nuclear weapons? Zero, nothing. Indeed, rumors have it that he actually held back the Israelis from doing something about it. What did literally Trump? He killed one Iranian general, and he gets like, pat him on the back. What a hero. Trump, tough on Iran. Did nothing. Nothing. He left Iran with a more advanced nuclear program than what he got from Obama. Now, Obama was terrible, but Trump was no better. No better. So Iran's in a much stronger position today, not because of Biden, but because of Trump. Trump went off of the treaty and then did nothing. The whole point of going off the treaty is then saying, oh, but if you develop the weapons, we're coming after them. Trump indeed was engaged in diplomacy with Iran towards in the final year of his administration. He was trying to cut a deal with Iran. What do you think Trump is going to do in Ukraine? What is Trump going to do with Hamas? He's all about diplomacy. He's all about cutting a deal, cutting a deal, cutting a deal. It's all about the deal. He's a deal maker. The only way to get rid of the Iranian nuclear program is to destroy it. That requires big bombs. It requires sustained effort, because it's not going to be one big bomb. And I'm not talking about nukes. I'm just talking about bunker-busting bombs. Nukes works too, but bunker-busting bombs. And it requires a sustained effort of bombing specific facilities and destroying the capabilities, and then making it very clear, unequivocal, that every time they fix those facilities, every time they try to do it somewhere else, every time they move the facility somewhere else, every time we get a hint that they're going to build anything relating to converting uranium into anything, we will bomb that and destroy that. Now, Israel could do some of that. It doesn't have the bigger bunker-busting bombs that the U.S. has, although maybe they have something different. I don't know. Maybe they have some home-designed stuff. I don't know. They certainly have nukes, so they could use that. And Israel is sitting on its hands. Netanyahu has given several brilliant speeches about the very fact that Iran is a major existential threat to the West. He has made an incredible case that Iran is indeed an existential threat to Israel. And he has committed over and over again over the last 16 years that he will never let Iran develop a nuclear bomb. And yet Iran is 2 weeks away. Now, it hasn't decided to do it because I think it worries about the potential backlash. And remember, the United States has enough forces right now in the Middle East it has enough forces right now in the Middle East to defeat any army in the world. I mean, the array of ships and troops, particularly ships, that it has and air assets that it has in the Middle East right now, it could take on Russia, it could take on China with those resources, and it could certainly take on Iran. And Iran right now is tepid, it's cautious, it does not want all that firepower aimed at it. But that's going to change. And it doesn't matter who's in the White House. Nobody has shown a willingness to take it on. And the reality is Israel has not. Now, why Israel didn't do it a few months ago when Iran launched that attack on Israel, why Israel didn't, on a massive scale, take out their nuclear program, if ever they were handed an excuse, international legitimacy, if you will, on a silver platter, that was it, and they didn't do it. So, I don't know. And you guys still love Netanyahu, even though he keeps saying this and doesn't do a thing about it. And Iran keeps moving ahead. All right, let's see. I have quite a few other depressing developments. All right, let's do these. Let's try to do these quickly. It turns out, you remember, what was it, a week ago, 2 weeks ago? 3 concerts, Taylor Swift concerts in Vienna, Austria, were canceled. A lot of disappointed fans, a lot of Americans had flown to Austria just to see Taylor Swift. and she was going to perform in a massive, I guess, stadium where she was going to. There were tens of thousands of people there, and Austrian authorities at the time said that there was a plot to attack, an ISIS plot to attack during the concert and to kill people, and so they canceled the concerts and they arrested the people. It turns out that this was based on a tip that the CIA provided. It was intelligence. The CIA actually identified the potential terrorists who were all arrested. This has all had links to Islamic State. The plan, according to CIA director, was to kill tens of thousands of people in these stadiums. These terrorists were ready with weapons and, I guess, bombs to go into one of these Taylor Swift concerts and just kill everybody that they could. They were planning on huge numbers, tens of thousands of people in this concert, including, I'm sure, many Americans, and were quite advanced in this. I'm quoting from the director of the CIA. Of course, the Austrians were able to make these arrests, and these people will sit in jail for a long time. But it just shows you that ISIS is still active out there. ISIS, of course, this group of ISIS is based in Afghanistan. This is the same Afghanistan that the United States withdrew out of, handing. I'm not against withdrawal. We just should have withdrawal in 2003. But under different circumstances, under circumstances of victory. But this is Afghanistan that we handed back to the Taliban with much fanfare, signed a peace deal with them. Thank you, Donald Trump. And that is now a home for both ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And we're gonna, unfortunately, in the West, see more and more of these kind of planned attacks. And luckily, we have intelligence services that are quite mostly at this kind of stuff very competent, very bad at analyzing our enemy and their economies and their military capabilities and all of that, but really good at, I think this is primarily the NSA, signal intelligence, and maybe, hopefully we have agents on the ground as well within the ISIS networks. I'm not convinced of that, but hopefully we have very good intelligence, and we can catch these bastards almost all the time before they commit the crime, before they commit the terrorist act. It's the 1/10 of 1% we don't catch, and hundreds or thousands of people die as a consequence. We all need to be aware that exists out there in the world. I wouldn't change your behavior about it, but when you see heightened security in the Taylor Swift concert or in a World Cup game or wherever, know that this is the reason. This is the reason. It's because the bad guys are still out there, and that Bush and Obama and Trump and Biden have not done anything to really stop them. And it's unlikely Kamala or Trump will do anything in the future to stop them, other than rely on great intelligence to try to figure out what they're going to do and prevent them from doing the particular concrete rather than stopping them at the source. All right. Do you know where the biggest conflict right now, where civilians are dying, the biggest military conflict, deadly war going on right now in the world is, where large numbers of civilians, even you could say large numbers of Muslims, are being killed? I mean, most people, I think, right now would say Gaza. It's the Israelis, they're slaughtering those Gazans. No. What's happening in Gaza is nothing as compared, and of course, Israel is doing everything it can not to kill civilians. The biggest conflict in the world right now, in terms of civilian casualties, is happening in the third largest country in Africa, and that is in Sudan, where about 150,000 people have been slaughtered, bodies are piling up, makeshift cemeteries. You can see the piles of bodies from space. More than 10 million people, that's 1/5 of the population, have been forced to flee their homes. There's probably going to be a famine, and in this case, I believe the famine warnings, whereas with Gaza there was never going to be famine. Here there is a famine, likely to be a famine, that could kill, by some estimate, 2.5 million people by the end of the year. 2.5 million people. I doubt that those numbers are right. That sounds a little hysterical, but I think that the famine is real and the potential for tens or hundreds of thousands of people to die is real. This is basically a civil war within Sudan. Don't ask me between whom and whom, because the two parties are really, by every measure, indistinguishable. One is backed by Russia and the others are backed by like Saudis and other Arab states. Neither one are the good guys. They're all bad guys. But they're killing their own people left and right. And, you know, they're basically destroying whole cities. They're razing cities to the ground. The capital city is basically, you know, the capital city is being completely destroyed. You know, this is going to be major. First of all, this is the third largest country in Africa, so it's a big place. It has borders with a lot of countries that are going to see massive refugee flows, starting with Egypt, which has a border to the north. It has a long coast, 800 kilometers of coastline with the Red Sea. That same Red Sea, the Houthis are bombarding to stop ships crossing into the Suez Canal. Well, these guys have even more control over who can travel into the Suez Canal if they wanted to obstruct that key artery of global trade. We're talking about a population that's probably going to start making its way as refugees in an attempt to make it into Europe. They will first flood into Kenya, Tanzania. Well, they're not going to go to Somalia, because Somalia is where more fighting is going on, but they'll go to a bunch of other countries in that region to try to escape the violence. Anyway, massive destabilizing. Nobody cares about it. Nobody talks about it. 150,000 Muslims killed, I think, just in the capital. Millions of people potentially going to die, and nobody cares. Why? Because it's Muslim killing Muslims, I guess, because nobody can make any heads or tails of it. There's no oppressor and oppressed. They're all oppressed. So it's oppressed killing oppressed. That doesn't count. It doesn't fit into the rhetoric. It's not Jews killing Muslims. It's not successful people. It's not successful model. And just nobody cares. And I think there's a sense in which we don't need to care. It's not civilization versus barbarism, because both sides are barbaric. We should only care in the sense that, first of all, to put whatever's happening in terms of civilian casualties into proportion. And second, because this is the world without the Israel of the world. Without civilization. Without Western civilization. This is what makes Israel. Israel actually brings stability to the Middle East. It brings civilization to the Middle East. And to the extent that Arab countries around it recognize that, want to deal with it, want to trade with it, want to embrace the values that Israel represents, to that extent you have peace in the Middle East, and to the extent that they reject it, you have Sudan. I mean, think about what's going on in Yemen. Yemen is not in Africa, it's in the Middle East, it's in Asia, and you've got a civil war where hundreds of thousands of civilians have died, maybe over 1 million, and nobody cared, first. And secondly, that's the state of nature. That state of nature without civilization. And who civilizes? It's the West. But we're the oppressors. We're the bad guys somehow. We are told by our campus leftists. Campus leftists, by the way, who are coming back to school And all indications are that they are going to start the school year off with a demonstration and a protest and occupying buildings and tent cities and disruption to the school year. It's already started in those campuses that have opened, or some campuses that have opened. Most administrations, I won't say all, are completely ill-prepared, have no clue what to do, and disasters. I did meet at this conference in Frankfurt that I was at, I did meet two university presidents. I won't mention which universities. Both have done a good job. Both are prepared, but both have campuses where the left is not dominant in the way they are at the Ivy Leagues and in California schools and other places. All right, what else do we want to talk about? Yeah, let's just talk about this quickly because it's a story that came up yesterday. We talked about it a lot yesterday, but I just learned a little bit more about this today. So this is SB 1047. This is the AI, artificial intelligence regulatory bill going through California, which is just an absolute disaster. Give you an example of one of the things that this bill includes. It's going to require developers to monitor what their customers do with their AI. So not what they do with their AI, but so if you develop an AI system and then your customer takes it, and then the customer is going to apply it to all kinds of things, biotech, research, maybe, what do you call it, autonomous cars, whatever, right? You, the developing company, the company that developed the AI, are responsible to monitor what the customers do. And you are legally liable if they use it in a way that causes harm. So this reminds me of the Telegram situation. You build a platform, people use the platform to cause harm. You, the platform owner, now are liable? You create an AI software, does no harm in and of itself. The customer takes it, uses it, manipulates it, does what a customer does to apply it to a particular topic. It does harm. You, the developer, are now liable. Just one of many things. So if somebody, for example, uses AI to hack into an autonomous vehicle and cause a collision, you, the AI developer, are responsible for that. Even though you didn't do it, you didn't design it to be able to do that, but it can. That's the thing about AI. It can do more things than what you specifically designed it to do. So this is just one more of the crazy things that are in this bill. One more of the things that are going to restrain innovation, restrain progress. One of the things that surprised me about this bill and worries me about this bill, well, worries me not about this bill, but worries me about this, is that one of its supporters, not advocates against it, one of its supporters is none other than Elon Musk. And this is exactly the sense in which I keep telling you, this guy is mixed. He heroically stands up to the Brazilian government. He heroically stands up for free speech. He heroically stands up and does not fold to the demands of the Brazilian government. But note that he's completely in the pocket, in many respects, of the Chinese government. He's not going to say a word against China. He's not going to say a word about the violations of individual rights going on in China. He's not going to say a word about the fact that Twitter is blocked in China. He's not going to talk about it because he has too many economic interests in China when it comes to Tesla. So that's just a side note about Elon Musk and China and how mixed he is. But here, he is supporting government regulation of AI, bad regulations of AI. Again, I think government probably has a role in AI to really figure out what the real dangers of AI are, the real dangers, not the pretend ones, and to make sure that those are not, it's not used in ways that endanger people. But this isn't it. Pretty much the entire industry knows that. But he is siding with the AI doomsdayers, the AI nutcases, and supporting this bill. This is the same bill as all the kind of AI is going to kill us all people are supporting. And it's sad to see somebody like Elon Musk support this. So we still don't know if Newsom's going to sign it or not. He has to do it one way or the other before January 1, 2026. I guess if he doesn't sign it, it goes into effect January 1. So he literally has to veto it to avoid it going. So we will see if Newsom does the right thing or not. And again, disappointed in Elon Musk, but as I said before, Elon is a very, very, very mixed character. All right. Should we call that the news? I've still got a bunch of stories, but I see we've got, reasonable number of questions. Not as many as sometimes, but not bad. If you want to tell people that we're on right now and taking questions, you can go on Twitter and do that. Use Elon Musk's thing to talk about it, so we can get more questions and we can get more content and we can go get more stuff to talk about. All right, so that is that. Let me close that window. Let me close these windows. Let me move this to the front over here. Okay, so we're gonna do Super Chat. Before that, I want to remind everybody that Super Chat is one of the ways in which not only can you ask questions and dictate the kind of direction of the show and the content and all of that, but it's also a way to support the show, value for value. You listen, you get some value, otherwise you wouldn't listen. Some of you listen regularly. The show couldn't exist without you in exchange to that listening, to hopefully benefiting, making a payment in kind. So trade. So part of that is through the Super Chat, stickers. I see Hunter. No, that's a question, not a sticker. God, where did I want to go from there? Yes, I wanted to say that's one way to support the show. Another, of course, is through monthly contributions. You can do that on Patreon. Trying to grow that Patreon base, trying to get more contributions through Patreon. Patreon's a great platform. It's an easy platform to come and make a contribution. It's an easy platform to get messaging from us. If you actually make a contribution on Patreon, a monthly contribution, regular monthly contribution, you can actually listen via the RSM on Patreon to the show's ad-free. So we've added onto Patreon. We are adding onto Patreon these shows audio only, without any advertising, so that you can listen to them on your podcast app without advertising. So that is one of the benefits of Patreon. So those of you who are not yet supporters of the show on a monthly basis, please consider going to Patreon. And in doing so, you can also, of course, use PayPal to support the show. Those of you who'd like to sponsor a show, a topic of your choosing, it's $1,000. All right, let's see. We've got three main sponsors for the show. John Barban, B-A-R-B-A-N, who talks about exercise, diet, nutrition, health, all those kind of fun topics, applies it to you personally, integrates the information for people like Atia and all these other doctors you can find online, or not doctors, researchers, health and fitness gurus and stuff like that, and tries to really customize programs for you as individuals, or at least give you the tools to do it yourself for yourself. And then we've got the Ayn Rand Institute. The Ayn Rand Institute right now is encouraging students all over the Western Pacific. Is that right? It's west from here. All over the Western Pacific to apply for scholarships to attend our Ayn Rand conference in Brisbane, Australia. The Ayn Rand conference in Brisbane, Australia will be December 6th through 8th. Regular registration for non-students hasn't opened up yet. It will, I think, within a week or two. But for now, we are taking scholarship applications. You can apply if you're interested in studying Objectivism, if you have a passion for the study of Objectivism, you can apply for a scholarship. Now, the scholarships are going to be capped at a certain amount. I think it's $600 that you can apply for travel. But if you're an exceptional candidate and you're coming in from Seoul, South Korea, or from New Delhi, is there such a place as New Delhi anymore? They probably changed the name. But from, India, or from Singapore, or from Hong Kong, or from far away, in other words, then maybe they'll be able to give you a little bit more than the $600 right now applied to the scholarship. I don't know, but you can try. So I would basically say South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Asia, all the way up through China, Mongolia, and South Korea. Any students in those areas, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, of course, Japan, might be doing an event in Japan in December, and Philippines. I know there are a lot of people interested in Ayn Rand in the Philippines, and Malaysia and Indonesia, and I'm not going to name Papua New Guinea, I guess, Thailand, Colombia, Laos, Burma, Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. Anybody from those places who wants to come to the conference, please apply for a scholarship. You can do that at aynrand.org/start here. aynrand.org/start here. So please join us. It's going to be, we're going to have a blast in Brisbane. I'm going to be there. Nikos is going to be there. Nikos is fun, and he's a great speaker, and he's really, really smart, really good guy. And the two of us are going to talk about Ayn Rand, about morality, about ethics, about capitalism, about morality of capitalism. I think we're gonna switch. Nikos is going to talk about everything I usually talk about, and I'm going to talk about everything he usually talks about. I'm kidding, but we're going to have a lot of fun there. So please come on over and join us. December 6th to 8th, aynrand.org/start here. And then finally, Alex Epstein is the author of alexepstein.substack.com. The Substack there, he's the author of Energy Talking Points. He is the most knowledgeable person I know in the world on issues of energy, of issues of environmentalism, and fossil fuels. So please check out alexepstein.substack.com. All right, let's jump into the questions. Nevfeld, this is actually a leftover from yesterday. He asks, I discovered your show in 2021. You conquered my heart after October 7th. Thank you. Sad that it took such a tragic event to do it. Couldn't show my appreciation sooner. I wanted to book a one-on-one talk with you, but PayPal doesn't work here. Any suggestions? Yeah, I mean, we can do it via Venmo. We can do it via, I don't know, you can wire me the money. We can do it by any application. You can Zelle. I don't know what application will work in Turkey. But I'm surprised WhatsApp doesn't have an app associated with WhatsApp that allows you to transmit money. But it just, you can, we can do the one-on-one and you can later pay me. We can figure it out, in other words. So email me. The way to, the best way to communicate about stuff like this and for us to talk about my price for one-on-ones and all of that is through email, yaron@yaronbrookshow.com. yaron@yaronbrookshow.com. Email me and we'll figure something out on Nevfeld. Andrew, in defense of parents who don't want to answer constant whys from their children, due to bad epistemology, many children ask whys that are irrelevant. Knowing to delimit one's knowledge according to purpose is a skill. God. I'm sorry. That's, Andrew, that's funny. Children don't continue to ask why, or children ask whys that are irrelevant, not due to bad epistemology. That's ridiculous. It's not bad epistemology. Children don't know. They don't know what they don't know, and they don't know a lot. They're trying to figure out epistemology. It's not that they're bad epistemology, quite the contrary. They're asking why questions to figure out what good epistemology looks like, if you will. Not that they know they're doing that. So while you as an adult will look at it and say, well, that's a stupid why question, it's absolutely not a stupid why question from the perspective of the child, and that is the only perspective that matters. Your job as a parent is to show a child that some why questions are dead ends, that some why questions don't have answers. And to the extent that you can, in language appropriate to a 2 or 3 year old, try to indicate to them why. Why the why question is not a good question. But the child is exactly exhibiting the right epistemology. They're testing it out. How do why questions work? Well, let me ask a bunch of why questions and see how the people who are supposed to know, the adults in the room, answer them. What more do you want of a child? So that's not a child exhibiting bad epistemology. That's a child exhibiting good epistemology, figuring it out. Okay, so imagine yourself with an empty brain, with no knowledge of anything. And you're just opening your eyes and looking around, and you're seeing things, and you've identified, you've got words for different things, you've got some semblance of concepts, and now you want to understand causality. You want to understand why things are happening. Now, you don't put it in those phases, but that's kind of the next step, is to try to figure out relationships. So you start asking why. And it would assume pre-existing intrinsic knowledge in your brain for us to assume that you would know when to stop asking the question. That's something that has to be learned. Has to be learned. We are born tabula rasa in terms of content. That content has to be discovered. One of the ways to discover the content, is to do stuff. Is just to do it. How does a child know that the oven is hot? Well, they're never going to know the oven's hot until they burn themselves. Or come close to it, right? And is that bad epistemology that they put their hand on the stove? No, it's the only way for them to learn. It's good epistemology. They're trying to figure stuff out. It's exactly what good epistemology is about. But it's very difficult. You've got to teach a kid when they're counterproductive, but doing that is hard because you have to do it in the context of the child. And at some point, sometimes what will happen is the child will just figure out that you as an adult are getting exacerbated by the constant whys, and they all start working on trying to figure out when does a why generate an actual response from you, and when does a why generate a exasperation from you, and then now figure out over time what the difference between the two are. You, if you're a good parent with a good grasp of epistemology, could try to help them in the process. But they're going to have to figure it out in one way or the other. Shazbot, quote, this is from John Galt. The mystics of both schools who preach the creed of sacrifice are germs that attack you through a single soul, your fear of. Who knows what that is? Did they do it? I don't know where Shazbot is gone. That was a long time ago. Let's see what the result was. Did anybody, I guess I didn't get, did I get another $20 for Shazbot? I don't think I did, so I don't think anybody got the right answer. There's Shazbot. No, they were talking about Kamala Harris. They couldn't be bothered. None of that. None of that. Yeah, so I don't see. The mystics of both schools who preach the creeds of sacrifice are germs that attack you through a single soul, your fear of. Hunter Gresham says relying on your mind. Okay, anybody else? Your fear man will disappear. No, fear man will disappear. All right, we'll see if anybody, I'm going to leave it up. We'll see if anybody, I want that $20, extra $20. So we'll see if anybody completes the sentence. Come on, we've got a little bit of what do you call it? Competition going on here. Who's going to come up with it first? What did I want to do here? All right. Hunter Gresh's got it. Fear of relying on your mind. Excellent. Makes complete sense. Okay, Michael. Thank you, Shazbot, for both the question and the $20 for the answer. Michael, James Carville seems to think Trump will win. He argued historically Trump underperforms in polls because people are ashamed to admit to pollsters that they're voting for Trump, and that sexism will play a role here. The same thing happened in 2016. I think it's possible. As I said yesterday, what's his name, Silva, his models are still showing Trump's likelihood of winning is 52%, 52 point something versus Harris's 47 point something. So I think it's very much a toss-up. I think it's going to be very close, and I think Trump could very well win. I don't know if it's likely, but I think it's yep. So it's hard to say, right? It's hard to say, and I think it's too early. The other question is, it's true that 8 years ago, people were ashamed to say they support Trump. Do you get the sense that that's true today? I don't get the sense at all. I think, if anything, people are emboldened to say they will support Trump. And in some parts of the country, they're ashamed to say they will support anybody else. So I don't know if that dynamic still works. Sexism certainly is in play, but it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if 8 years after it certainly played with Hillary, if it'll play again. So I'm not convinced Carville is right, although Carville is pretty smart as a political analyst. Yeah, I mean, Trump could very well win. I have no opinion about it. I'm not good at making predictions like this. I will say that I don't think Trump is running a particularly smart campaign, and this move, for example, on abortion is going to be interesting how it actually plays out with his base, and therefore with the passion to bring people out. And I just don't know how it plays. Again, I'm not good at these things. I don't understand politics. All right, Nevfel says, just a feedback to your shows on Ocon and ARI, ugly. I don't understand that. I have to skip forward. It's as if you wear a shirt where you're not born for. On Olympics, boring. You're praising of Elon Musk, unbearable. I had to say, Siri, stop the video. Okay. On Ocon and art. On Ocon and ARI, ugly. I don't know what that even means. I had to skip forward. which you're not born for. Ocon and ERI. These are my talks. All right. The Olympics boring. All right. We have different tastes. I don't think they're boring. Praise of Elon Musk. Yeah, when I don't praise him, I get harassed. So can't win. Can't win with the public on that one. Thanks you, Tefel, I think. Jennifer. Unfortunately, even long before Christianity, sacrifice was a thing, throwing babies off cliffs to bring rain and things like that. You would think it would be obvious that doesn't work, yet people keep doing it. Yeah, I mean, Christianity, supposedly one of its innovations was the end of human sacrifice. That is, in order to end human sacrifice, they sacrificed Jesus. Jesus was supposed to be the last human sacrifice in terms of literally killing a human being in order to appease the gods. It's funny that they ended it by doing it, by worshiping somebody who does it. You would think they'd figure it out. You would think that human beings would figure out that sacrifice is a disaster, that it is horror, that it is, I mean, it's obviously self-destructive. That's the whole point. That the gods don't exist. I mean, the very existence of religion, the continued existence of religion, is bewildering, given religion's just abysmal record in human history in terms of providing answers to human beings, providing them with leads to living a good life. It's just as a religion is a complete and utter disaster. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what it's going to take. Go figure. I have no idea. Nefel says your shows. Okay, so this is the positive. He gave us the negatives. He doesn't like my Econ and ERI talks. He doesn't like my talking about the Olympics. He probably doesn't like my talking about art. And he doesn't like me praising Elon Musk. I did both today, so I don't know. So, maybe somebody who likes my Olympic shows can say something. Your shows on philosophy and politics, excellent. On the Middle East, fantastic. You're my hero. In general, very good. Keep going. Thank you, Nefel. I appreciate the scorecard. Not your average algorithm. Why hasn't objectivism been able to overpower the universities? Quantity? Objectivism is small? And the real question is, why hasn't objectivism attracted more talented people? That's the fundamental question. And I don't have an answer to that. Because if we attract enough quality people, then we will take over the universities. But it requires us to attract vast, large, unbelievably large numbers of high quality people. And that's the fundamental question. Why hasn't objectivism been able to attract really, really smart, high quality people? And that is a significant question, and I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. Because we need more really, really smart, really, really high quality, whether they become intellectuals or whether they become the next set of billionaires out there. Billionaires out there have been impacted by objectivism, but haven't become objectivists. But when they do, that's a game changer. And so I don't know why. It's not for lack of people reading Ayn Rand. We've got millions and millions and millions and millions of people reading Ayn Rand. It's the power of 2,000 plus years of horrible philosophy, horrible ideas. Eric says he has an IQ of 180. Well, good. I mean, so are you going to become a future intellectual? What are your plans, Eric? And are you going to help us take over the universities? And are you going to become a billionaire? One of those two. So it's not about IQ. IQ is important. You have to be smart. And IQ is a component of being smart. You have to be smart. You have to be honest. You have to be committed to objectivism. And then you have to be ambitious. And hopefully Eric is one of the really, really smart, really, really ambitious, really, really successful people that are going to change the world because they were exposed to these ideas. Raphael. Hi, Yaron. I'm about to start working in M&A and need a refresher on DCF valuation. DCF, remind me what DCF stands for. You're asking me finance questions. I haven't done finance, this level of Finance 101 in 25 years. Could you explain the key points, especially how to think about weighted average cost of capital? Also, do you have any good resources on how to manage a team? Thanks. I'm not laughing at you, Raphael. I'm laughing at the circumstances. Discounted cash flow. Discounted cash flow. How soon do you need this refresher? Right now? When are you starting this job? I'll probably be teaching a finance class for Ayn Rand University, where I will definitely be covering the discounted cash flow model and weighted average cost of capital, maybe, but certainly the discounted cash flow model. But that won't be until probably early next year, and that's probably too late. You're starting in January. Somebody should sponsor a show on this, because the discounted cash flow model is very, very simple. It basically says the value of a financial asset today equals the value of all future cash flows or potential cash flows, right? Uncertain cash flows, discounted to today based on an interest rate, a discount rate. It's not really an interest rate, discounted rate that reflects both the real rate of return, inflation, and the riskiness, the uncertainty of your estimations regarding those cash flows. So that if you had two companies with the same projected cash flows into the future, but one, those cash flows were certain, and one, the cash flows were more risky, then obviously the one that's more risky the value is going to be lower, because the discount rate will be higher, and you're discounting the same cash flows at a higher rate. The end result will be lower. So that's basically what the discount cash flow model is. It basically says every financial asset is valued, should be valued, as the sum of all future cash flows discounted to today. And the discounting is based on the risk-free rate, inflation, and a risk premium. Now, how you do that, and how you calculate that, and how you come up with the discount factor, that is all more art than science. Weighted average cost of capital, all it says is you want to look at if you look at a balance sheet of a company, and it raises capital, some by debt and some by equity. What you want is the weighted average cost of capital. So you weight it by, let's say it's 60% equity, 40% bonds, debt. You look at the cost of the debt, you look at the cost of the capital. The weighted average cost of capital is 60% times the cost of capital of the debt plus 40% times the cost of capital, that is the expected return on the equity, equals the weighted average cost of capital. And I think everything I just said is true. But we're accessing here pretty stuff that I haven't really talked about in a long time. This kind of cash flow model I did talk about for my Jordan Peterson course on finance, which who knows when will be out, hopefully by the end of the year. And then you can take that as a refresher course. Although I don't get into much math, I just do a little bit. Thanks, Rafael. Yeah, I wish you had somebody who could put $1,000 down to do a whole class on a whole show on finance, and then I could give you a refresh on everything. Wait a second. So Eric said something. Eric said, this is 180 IQ, Eric. I'm good at everything I'm interested in and integrate new knowledge very quickly. No, but my question is, what do you want to do? What do you want as your career? What is your ambition? What is your purpose in life, if you will? If you have one, you might be too young to have a purpose, that's fine. Or you might not have decided on a purpose, but I am curious what it is, because, I mean, and how committed you are to objectivism. Those are really what I'm curious about. God, you guys come up with these questions that are like, I mean, these require a show to answer them. Or a book. Andrew asks, how is consuming art a selfish act? I mean, basically the answer to this requires explaining the role of art in human life. Why art is a requirement, a required value for human life to live. And I'd say to flourish, but to live is to flourish. When I say to live, it's that capital L life, which means to flourish, to live as a human being, to live fully as a human being, to live fully as a conceptual being. So what does it mean to live fully as a conceptual being? It means that you're using reason in every part of your life. And you're dealing with a lot of very abstract ideas. A lot of a lot of abstractions in your moral code, in your attitude towards the world and to life, and how you engage with the world. To live as a human being means to abstract, to be conceptual. That is hard. And the human mind needs, Ayn Rand defines it as a need of the human mind. It needs to periodically, frequently, see those abstractions in reality. See those abstractions in your life. And this is true of every human being, because every human being that's living is dealing with abstractions, whether you're a theoretical physicist or a simple worker. If you're fully living, you're in the world of abstractions, because at the very least, your moral code is abstract. Your perspective about the world is an abstraction. Your view of your own existence within the world is an abstraction. Your whole perspective on, I belong here, which is at such a core of your self-esteem, is an abstraction. And you need all of that concretized, made real. And that's what art does. Art makes those abstractions, those metaphysical values that you hold, that are super abstract about yourself, about the world, about reality. Art concretizes them for you. It makes them real. It puts it in front of you. And it confirms them for you in the sense that it says, yes, that's my world. That's it. That is it. And that solidifies, but it doesn't solidify it intellectually. It solidifies it spiritually and emotionally. It gives you that emotional fuel that is required to keep living at this abstract level. It requires fuel. It requires energy. It requires effort. And to keep you engaged, it gives you heroes to show you what a man's capable of. It gives you a sharp view of reality to show you that reality exists, and you have the tool, and the artist had the tool to see it as it is. It gives you an essentialized view of life and of man and of action. Essentialized. So that ability to essentialize, that ability to abstract, but it gives you essentialization in concretes. So it provides you with a concrete representation of your most abstract ideas, and that fuels your ability to go back into the world of abstraction, where anybody who's living with capital L is actually living. That is my short version. Hopefully that was helpful, Andrew. All right, let's go back to Eric. Eric says, theoretical physics has always been my ambition. I've been a committed objectivist since just after 9/11. Not too young, I'm 47. All right, so this is the thing. If you're a theoretical physicist, then I think that the thing is that when you win the Nobel Prize for physics, acknowledging Ayn Rand's contribution to epistemology that made your Nobel Prize possible would be huge in advancing the case of objectivism. It would be one step in taking over those universities. That's an example. Andrew, you almost always tax my brain. Andrew says, great answer, sorry to tax your brain. You almost always tax my brain. But what am I here for? If not for you guys to tax my brain. That's my purpose in life, and it's why I'm here. I do not have an IQ anywhere near Eric's IQ. So to me, any one of these questions is indeed taxing. I have no idea what my IQ is, but it's not 180. I can guarantee that. Wyatt, can you quantify how much damage Trump did in his first term versus how much damage he would do in his second term? Quantify. I don't know what you mean by quantify, but the damage was immense. He has destroyed the Republican Party. He has made the Republican Party a populist, anti-capitalist political party. At least in the past, it was semi-soft pro-capitalism. I don't think I can measure it. I can't say, oh, he hurt GDP by 3%. He cost the U.S. economy $550 gazillion. What does that even mean? How do you measure this? I can say he destroyed the Republican Party. I can say he diminished any kind of sense of any kind of respect for any kind of institutions, even institutions that deserve respect in America, including our very system of government. He diminished. He did stupid things economically that you can measure, that cost thousands of jobs, that cost fractions of percents of GDP. I mean, this has been measured. His tariffs, there are paper after paper after paper in academic literature to show the measurable damage that Trump did in his first term. So that is easy to measure. I think he emboldened our enemies. I think he emboldened Putin. He emboldened Xi. He emboldened Iran. What else? He obviously did massive damage and has celebrated that damage to a woman's right to have an abortion by appointing the judges he appointed. But I don't know how to measure that. How do you measure any politician's impact on the world in terms of measurement in terms of a number. You don't measure things in numbers. How much damage would he do in a second term? I think a lot more. A lot more. And I think the main reason for that is that in his first term, he surrounded himself with actually high quality people who didn't like him. And there was a huge amount of turnover as a consequence. But he surrounded himself with people who were competent, were good. What's his name? The guy from Exxon, General Mathis, General Kelly, General McAllister, John Bolton, a bunch of people. And these were not MAGA people. These were not crazy conspiracy theory, rabid national conservatives. These were mostly conventional conservatives. I don't agree with them, but they were competent people. These are people who've held jobs and done stuff. And done, been successful at what they've done. Term number 2 is not going to be those people. The people Donald Trump appoints in term number 2 is going to be based on their loyalty to him. He has had 4 years to screen people. He's had 4 years to pick the people he wants around him. These are not going to be high quality people who disagree with him or don't like him. These are going to be people who are acolytes of him. These are going to be yes men. These are going to be people who follow a program that is much more consistent with what he believes in. And I think in that sense, the damage he done is going to be astronomical. I can't, in the first term, a few tariffs on steel, washing machines, and a few other things, primarily focused on China, but also the rest of the world. All terrible, all bad, all lost jobs, all lost everything. This time he wants 10 to 20% across the board. Economically devastating, economically horrific by every measure. The first term, he promised to build a wall. Okay, building a wall is just stupid, but it doesn't do that much harm. It's not gonna disrupt the economy, building a wall. This time, deportation of anywhere between 10 to 20 million people. Unbelievably costly, unbelievably devastating. Just horrific. Take Israel. Last time, he had people like Kushner and it was National Security Advisor and Mathis and all these people who were generally pro-Israel and guiding him through that. The same thing with Russia and everything. He had people around him that were holding him back from his instincts. This time, he's going to flip on Ukraine, has the potential to completely flip on Ukraine, side with Putin, cut a deal with Xi, cut a deal with the worst elements of the Palestinians. He's going to be, his instincts are not pro-Israel. I don't think he goes, and a lot of the people who support him are not pro-Israel in particular. So he's not going to be anywhere near as pro-Israel as he was the first term. He's going to cut a deal with Iran. That's what he wants to do. His foreign policy is going to be terrible the second time, given the people he is going to surround himself with. He doesn't have the adults in the room. All the adults in the room, he fired or they resigned, and they all can't stand him, and they all don't want to work for him, and they all think he's awful. And he's going to have a bunch of people who are not adults. And that's going to bring out his worst tendencies. That's not good for us. It's not good for America. Martin, thank you for the sticker. Paul, thank you for the sticker. Really appreciate it, guys. Appreciate the support. I think I caught all the stickers before. Jeremy, thank you for the sticker as well. Stephen Harper, maybe I didn't catch them all. I think those. Yigal Arbel, thank you for the sticker. All right, now I think I got them all. All right. That was from Wyatt. Harper Campbell. Did you see Dan Crenshaw and Bill Maher go at it over Trump? Pretty good exchange. I saw a segment of it. I mean, this is the thing. I kind of like Dan Crenshaw, and I cringe at the fact that he supports Trump. It just is nauseating that he's too good of a guy to support Trump. And so I think a lot less of him for supporting Trump. But Bill Maher is super sharp. Got to give him super sharp, but he goes after the left just as much as he goes after the right, which is great. Liam, did Gavin Newsom clean up California for his narcissistic desire to become president, not to make the citizens of California less miserable? Yeah, I mean, do you have any doubts about that? I mean, why didn't he clean it up 8 years ago? I mean, partially cleaned it up because the Supreme Court ruled that cleaning it up was constitutional. You weren't violating some right that they had. But there's no question. Much of this is about Gavin Newsom's political ambition and little to do with actual quality of life for Californians. All right, let's see. James Taylor. What's going to be a massive nationwide there's going to be a massive nationwide pro-Palestinian rally on October 7th to celebrate Palestinian resistance. These people are just naked Nazis. It's like they don't feel the need to hide it. Yeah, I cannot think of a more disgusting, despicable, horrific display of nihilism. Hatred of man for being man, hatred of the good for being the good, hatred of life, any kind of life, than a massive demonstration on October 7th, pro-Hamas. It's just despicable. And I don't know. I mean, my temptation would be to organize a big-ass demonstration, pro-Israel demonstration that goes basically head-to-head with these bastards. The pro-Israel demonstration, I think, if you did it smartly and you did it right, would be much bigger than the pro-Hamas one. And I would just do it in the same place, surround them, and just let them rot. I mean, I'm not advocating for using violence, but I'm advocating for standing up to these bastards, and yeah, I mean, I think there really, really, really needs to be a counter demonstration. Something big needs to be, you need to find out where this demonstration is going to happen, and there needs to be a massive counter demonstration that just shuts them down. I'd be happy to speak at such a demonstration, a pro-Israel demonstration, if somebody arranged it. But October 7th, you cannot allow them to dominate the screen, to dominate the street. You just can't allow it. NFL says, I discovered your show in 2022, but couldn't show my appreciation sooner. Had a bad financial situation. No problem, I appreciate it. Appreciate you showing it now. Andrew, egalitarians have tension with policies that cause prosperity. Their goal is not prosperity. A proper understanding of economics wouldn't sway them. I agree. It's not about economics. It's all about morality. Andrew says, someone tell Trump that some causes are worth fighting for. All conflict is not subject to compromise, not when it's a strong difference of principle. Yeah, I'm actually happy he's a pragmatist, a complete and utter sellout on abortion. That's a good thing. that is actually going to have real implications. Clark, have you met anyone who actually takes altruism seriously? Yeah, everybody. Who doesn't? I mean, what do you mean by takes altruism seriously? That literally wants to go out there and sacrifice their life for other people? No, but that wants to do that, and that is their perception of morality, and therefore feels guilty for not doing it, and votes in a way as to manifest it, and treats the issues that they confront, including interpersonal issues, from an altruistic perspective, with that nagging on them and pulling at them and causing them to act. Almost everybody. And I include most objectivists, certainly at the beginning of their path, because it takes a long time to get rid of the altruism. But take it seriously. I mean, look at the philosophers. Michael Walzer, who wrote the book on just war theory, who advocates for just war theory. If that's not taking altruism seriously, or take what's his name, the philosopher, the Australian philosopher, who advocates for giving away X amount of your income every month to charity. I forget his name right now, but the famous philosopher. Yeah, I mean, or the guy, what's his name? Scott Alexander, on his blog post describing how he went through a process of figuring out what the best, highest, most society benefiting use of his extra kidney was, and he decided that the best use of his kidney was to donate it to a random stranger. So he went into hospital and had his kidney removed, not to donate to a relative or somebody he cared for, or somebody, but just because the use of that kidney was better in a stranger than he had one already, so he didn't need the second one. I mean, but a lot of people are doing this. The whole effective altruist movement is obsessed with giving away their kidneys, right? Creepy, but a true story, and happening all the time. So yes, people are doing it. And Scott Alexander's not an idiot. I huge amount of respect for his analysis on a lot of different things. But that kind of analysis applied to ethics, sick. Michael, in your youth, would you ever have considered being an astronaut or pilot? I was never interested in being a pilot. I guess maybe an astronaut, although, I do have fear of heights. I don't know how that applies. I wanted to be a scuba diver. I wanted to be a scuba diver. But yeah, I think I considered an astronaut. I didn't think it was within the scope of living in Israel, within the scope of the possible. I never was attracted by the idea of being a pilot, for whatever reason. Liam, the degree of rationalization to excuse Trump's behavior is pretty extraordinary. Yes. And it's done all the time, and they have to do it constantly because he puts it out there. His insanity is on display every single day. I mean, watch these rallies. Watch what he says and how he says it. Not presidential material, sorry. Hunter, one of the State Department's recommendations to citizens who decide to travel to Sudan, draft a will and designate beneficiaries. They say that on the website. That is perfect. Yeah, I mean, but it's absolutely unequivocally true. Your chances of coming back, not that great. Not your average algorithm. Would you say at least 75% of people live miserable, pathetic lives? Globally, certainly. I don't think that's true in America. I think a lot of people have decent life in America. They're not pathetic lives in America. And maybe you could even extrapolate that to the West, but certainly globally, yeah. I don't know how to quantify these things. Maybe it's 75, maybe it's more. Maybe it does apply to America as well. It certainly applies to it relative to potential. I think people could have such more exciting lives. and they don't. Daniel, in what ways does government restrict the supply of medical students and doctors? I'm trying to think how it does it. So it does it through restricting the budgets, and this is done at the state level, restricting, and I guess at the federal level as well, restricting the amount of money medical schools get to train students. So medical schools are funded primarily by government. A lot of them are state universities, and most students who go to medical school, I don't think, actually pay their full tuition. So the medical schools are basically, subsidized by government. So they can control the strings of how much funding is provided in medical schools, and therefore they restrict the supply of doctors that way. And that's true in some countries, like in South Korea. Literally, I think the government has a quota of a certain number of medical schools every year. And actually, they just decided to dramatically increase it because there's a shortage of doctors, and the young doctors went on strike because they understand that what that means is their future earnings are going to go down, because more doctors means more competition, which means less earnings. But it's through the funding. And of course, you can't become a doctor without a license, and to get a license, you have to go to medical school. So it's through the medical school funding that they control the number of doctors. I don't think it's through failing more people. I think it's more about how many people they accept. This is true all over the world. Medical schools are very, very constrained by budgets that the governments give them that are never too big, never very big. The same is true in Israel, the same is true in certain countries in Europe. So in Israel, at least, a lot of doctors get trained in like Eastern Europe, Romania, and other places in Eastern Europe, where they have decent medical schools and where they don't have constraints, and where you can pay and it's not that expensive, and then they have to come back and get jobs. And one way, of course, to deal with government restrictions on the supply of medical students is to allow immigrants, allow doctors to immigrate. So, but they don't allow doctors to immigrate, or they place the licensing requirement on doctors who immigrate to get a license in their new country, which means they have to go through a lot of effort, massive, to get that license. Oops, what did I do? Liam says, why is MAGA fascism so much more energizing to young people than libertarianism or objectivism? Because it requires less of them, because it's an appeal to emotion, because it allows them to cultivate what the schools have encouraged them to cultivate from when they were very young, which was emotion and tribe and their social connections, because it's tribal. We still live in a world in which asking people to be rational, to think for themselves, to engage in the effort and the energy expenditure associated with reason is just not appealing. And we still live in a world, in spite of Ayn Rand, in spite of everything, in spite of the fact that we're in the 21st century, when appeal to some kind of flag or some kind of emotion, particularly motivated by fear, fear of the left, all those trans are going to come and chop off your dick, you better join us. It's an appeal to emotion. At the end of the day, that's what it is. And it's, the fact that it's led by a moron is gives it more power because it really emphasizes how this is not about reason. You don't need to think. This is all about emotion. This is all about, emoting and how this is supposed to make you feel. And somehow Trump makes people feel empowered by the tribe, empowered by the group. I mean, I'm not comparing Trump to Hitler, but it's the same mechanism. It's the same idea. It's the same thing that, every authoritarian uses, same thing that the left uses. It's an emotional attachment. I think the left is more intellectual. It appears to pseudo a pretense of reason, at least it used to, maybe not today. But it's all about emotion. And the key with MAGA is fear. The key with MAGA is fear. And because these kids have come out of a school system that has not taught them how to think, they are automatically fearful. Because if you can't think, you don't understand the world. You don't know what's going on in the world. And he leverages fear. And in a world in which people don't know how to use their mind, in a world full of fear, objectivism has a hard time catching on. Liam, bullies simply cannot stand the barest mockery. Trump is fixated on every insult thrown his way. He's still upset they called him weird. Yes. I mean, Trump is the classic low self-esteem bully. And people with low self-esteem can't stand to be criticized. They can't stand the insults. It drives them nuts. And again, part of that is his narcissism. He needs to be adored. He needs to be loved. How can anybody dare criticize him? He's beyond criticism. I mean, he's done all these amazing things. How dare anybody criticize him? So, but it's exactly this low self-esteem bully mentality that cannot handle criticism. I mean, that's how you identify to lighter than somebody with low or high self-esteem. How do they handle being criticized? And somebody who gets all puffed up and all upset and all obsessed with the criticism and immediately lashes out, that is a clear sign of low self-esteem. Thoughts on Australia and Australians? Oh God, I don't have that many thoughts. I mean, I've only been to Australia once. I really liked it. It's a beautiful country, and it's got a lot going for it. My sense of Australians is it used to be at least, people with a real sense of independence and entrepreneurship, or at least it feels that way, although if you look at the numbers, you don't see it. A kind of a little bit like Americans in their kind of individualism. But the more you study Australians, you discover as a people that there's a lot of envy in Australia. There's a tall poppy syndrome. Nobody should show off that they have more, or they have done more, or they're better. But there's also, the lockdowns were real shocking. I mean, they were much worse in Melbourne, for example, than they were in the United States. And there was very little backlash, and that surprised me. It made me question kind of the independence. So I have to admit, I don't know that much about. I've only been there once. Of all the countries in the world, I haven't been there very much. I know, and I know Australians who've moved, but I don't know Australians who live in Australia. I don't know many of them. But I like them, the ones I know. They seem to be go-happy people, pretty friendly, adventurous, engaged. But I'll know more. I'm not going to be long in Australia. I'm just going to be a few days again, but hopefully I'll learn a little bit more about Australians this time. Boyce, Pesa. Would Alexander have been great without Aristotle? I don't think Alexander was great. I mean, what was he great? He was very good at slaughtering people, at conquering them, slaughtering them, you know, causing them to fear him. He was very good at conquest. Is that greatness? So I don't consider him that great. Would he have been good at all that without Aristotle? I don't know. Now, there's some argument that's made that in his conquests he brought Aristotelian philosophy to that part of the world, to the East. And maybe it's those remnants that ultimately led, let's say, the Indians to develop the zero, and Arabs or the Persians to develop algebra or do astronomical observations or whatever. That maybe that is the case. But and maybe that brought some good to the world. And that's certainly attributable to Aristotle. But what did Aristotle teach him that helped him to slaughter, I mean, literally slaughter thousands of people, if not, I don't know the numbers, maybe tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, in a pretty small human population back then. This is a long, long time ago. So I don't consider Alexander great in any respect. He was a bastard. Michael, why is Netanyahu so cowardly when it comes to taking military action when his base wants it? Is he more afraid of world opinion than his own voting base? I think it's a combination. He believes he can manipulate his voting base. He believes he can convince the voting base that he is the prudent guy who is doing the right thing. I think he's afraid of losing. I think he's afraid that if he engages in military action and loses, then he definitely will lose his base. So he knows he can manipulate them if he does nothing. But if he loses, if there are a lot of body bags, then you know, I don't think he knows he can't recover from that. I just think he's also just a coward. Decisions are hard. You know, these are hard decisions. They're hard decisions for anybody. But he doesn't have the confidence and the audacity of a Churchill, who just does, you know, who comes to decisions quickly and is decisive about them. He is a indecisive, takes his time, and I think fear plays a big role in it. I think he's definitely a coward, and he's afraid of losing. And he's afraid of making the wrong... What are people afraid of? They're afraid of making the wrong decision. He's afraid of making the wrong decision. And is he afraid of world opinion? Sure. But he's probably more afraid of what he believes history books will write about him. And he thinks that if he's wobs and weaves, he'll be written about in the history books as this, you know, political leader filled with wisdom and caution who you know, in times of trouble brought stability. I don't know. What do I know what he's thinking? Clark, a lot of comments on the Alex O'Connor debate are saying objectivism is not a serious philosopher and Craig is a lightweight. We need to get Encore in there with Alex. I agree. I think Craig is a lightweight, and I think giving a lightweight this kind of debating platform with somebody as big as Alex can do real damage. Can do real damage. I mean, somebody like Alex O'Connor, a debate on something like this needs to be done by a philosopher. It needs to be Encore or Greg. It needs to be somebody with real philosophical knowledge. They have to be good debaters, but yeah, I mean, it cannot be a lightweight, which I think Craig has always been. Clark, shouldn't some people have a fear of relying on their own mind? Maybe their minds aren't that great at making it on their own. Well, but what does that even mean? All you have is your own mind. So even if you got, let's say, low level of intelligence, that's just the reality. You're born with low horsepower, call it IQ, whatever. That's the mind you have. And in a modern society, in the society the kind of we have, absolutely you can make it on your own. Because you can learn new things, even when you're not that smart. Because there are great teachers out there. There's the internet, there are YouTube videos, there are experts, there are people who have studied this stuff. You don't have to invent vaccines. Somebody else invents them. But you need to have a mind and use the mind at whatever level you have to be able to evaluate the world around you at whatever level you are capable of, and everybody's capable of a level that allows for survival, and to then be able to evaluate experts. And it's not that hard to evaluate experts, particularly maybe today in a world in which we live, it's harder, but in a world in which institutions, in a sense, license experts, they give them credibility, there are all kinds of mechanisms by which we can validate expertise, at least at some level. You can't always be right. They're going to be quacks. They're going to be people who are wrong. They're going to be bad guys out there. But it's doable. So no, I think we live in a time where it's the easiest time ever for somebody with low intelligence to live a good life and to rely on their own mind. Again, unless you have IQ of 40 or 50 or something like that, where you really can't deal with any kind of abstraction, somebody's going to have to help you, and that's true. But if you have an IQ of 90, 100, 110, you can really, without question, survive and survive well in this world. Nate says, top 3 international destinations to visit. I mean, it really depends so much on what you're looking for, what you value, what your values are. For every person, that's going to be different. Now, and it depends where you've already been. I mean, if you're an American and you've never been to Europe, then you need to go to Europe. Because Europe is, you can't understand the present without knowing something about the past. History is really, really important. And Europe is where the history is. And it's a great opportunity to encounter that history and to engage with that history. It's also the place where the greatest art in the world is. And to the extent that art is a bastion of civilization, then you got to go and experience it. So 3 international, Italy, France, England, right? The core of Western civilization, really. Italy is the Renaissance, England and France are the Enlightenment. Italy is Renaissance art, France is 19th century art. England is not bad in 19th century, but that is the core. You got to go to those 3 places, and once you're in Europe, you should go to Amsterdam. Amsterdam's a fourth, I guess. But you do civilization, do Western civilization. I think if you care about history, if you like art, then Western civilization is the heart. You've got to go. I mean, this is, again, for people who haven't been. You got to go to Rome and Florence. Rome and Florence are just a must on every human being's bucket list. Rome and Florence should be a trip. Everybody should go to Paris. Paris is just a wondrous city. I mean, forget about the French, ignore them, and just focus on how beautiful the city is. It truly is. It is romantic, and it's beautifully built. And then if you're in Paris, you got to go to the Louvre, and you got to go to the Orsay, and you've got to see the great art that is represented in Paris. But it might even be worth going to Versailles and seeing the corruption of France. But that's Western civilization. That's the history. That's what brought us to where we are today. And then London is just such a, this is the heart of the British Empire and everything it represented, good and bad. Again, this is the place, if you take the UK as a whole, of the Scottish and British Enlightenment. This is John Locke. This is Newton. Go to Oxford. Go to Cambridge. Go see those great universities where these people studied, and experience what it's like. I mean, it's also, London is one of the great cities of the world. So I would go to, I'd say Italy, and then Amsterdam, I think, is a fantastic city. The art is amazing at the museum there, Vermeer and Rembrandt, but just the city and how it grew up and how it became as rich as it became, all of it is again, I've got a talk on that's on my channel, Amsterdam and the Birth of Capitalism. Greece, if you added a fifth, is another one. Greece is both beautiful. The islands are amazing. And Athens is the birth of Western civilization. Got to see that. Yeah, so there you go. Greece, Italy, France, Amsterdam, London, UK. That should be your track if you're interested in terms of international visits. That's where you should go. That's where you should take your kids. That's what the West is, and that should be a big part of your travel, is to educate yourself about what Western civilization is and what it's become, and you can see it. Andrew, I used your line that Israeli Arabs have more rights in Israel than in any other Arab country to a couple of leftists, and they enthusiastically agreed. Good. Wow. Right? Then they should be for annexation of the West Bank and Gaza and make them all Israeli citizens. Not that I'm advocating for that, but Nate says he went to Tokyo and liked it. Yeah, I mean, Tokyo's fun. Tokyo's fascinating because it's a cultural shock, right? Tokyo is so different. I mean, the letters are different. The culture is different. The people, the way they communicate is different. Their facial expression is different. It's fun, and it's a little bit of a shock to the system, which is fun, and it's also beautiful. You know, the aesthetic. I love the Japanese aesthetic. I think if I had a rank in terms of, if you said, okay, I could only go to 5 places in my life, I gave you the 5. Internationally, right? I'd say after that, we didn't get to Asia, but Asia's fascinating. Asia's fascinating. It's fascinating in that it's different and in that it's been successful. And Tokyo in particular, it's taken Western civilization and adapted it to its culture. And it's changed its culture to adapt to Western civilization. And you get this merger of a different culture, a different set of some, at least in the way they interact socially, values, and yet Westernized. And that is fascinating. And it's fascinating to see, you know, how the same and completely different Tokyo is from any other city in the West, let's say, different from New York, and yet the same in many respects. So it's just, I like Tokyo in that sense of it's kind of a shock to the system. You have to calibrate, and I find it fun. And it shows you also how Japan has very different culture, very different values, and yet look what it can become if it adopts Western values, if it adopts these Western ideas of individualism, of some capitalism. It's amazing. Rafael says, I'm seeing a girl who's independent but distant. She has a busy social life, and I saw her having dinner with another guy, no context. I want a simple, worry-free relationship. Should I stop seeing her? Because you saw her having dinner with another guy? I mean, maybe it's a brother. Maybe it's a friend. Do you believe that women can have friends who are male? I do. Ask her. No, I don't think you should stop seeing her. Ask her. And I don't know what a simple worry-free relationship is. I don't know what that is. I don't think such a thing exists. Unless you don't really want a relationship. if you're going to have a relationship with another person, there's no way that it will be worry-free. It's another person, it's another mind, it's another set of values, and you're trying to integrate your life with theirs, and that's going to create friction. There's no way that it just seamlessly, whoop, and there it goes. So you're going to have to figure out how to communicate. You're going to have to figure out how to ask questions. You're going to have to figure out why she's having dinner with another guy. Is she cheating on you? Is she dating somebody else? Or is she just have friends? If she has male friends, does that bother you? And if it does bother you, why? Should it bother you? So part of what happens in a relationship is you have to do a lot of introspection, and you have to grow as a human being. That's part of what a relationship does to you, because it puts you into situations where you have to figure stuff out about yourself. So the only way you're going to get a worry-free relationship, I think Christopher says, it's called no relationship. Because there just isn't such a thing. Relationships are going to cause friction. And part of growing up is figuring out how to deal with that friction. And fiction is not a bad thing. Life is there's lots of so weird that these batteries are going up. All right, sound now? Is sound back? Sound back, sound back. All right. I guess I'm using these more than I used to. All right, we got sound? Anybody? Anybody? Yes, okay. So Jeremy says, regarding the supply of doctors, also there are government-granted monopolies that control certification of residency training programs that NDs need to be licensed. So one of the things that medical schools, the reason they restrict the number of students they take in is they know that there are only a certain number of residency positions that their students, when they graduate, can accept, can go into. So that is a constraint on them. And those residency programs are, again, get funding from the government. So the government controls how many of these residencies there are. And you can't become a doctor in America without a residency. And the medical school is not going to train you to become a doctor unless they know they can find you a residency somewhere. So they know what the capacity of residencies is, and they adapt. But it's all ways in which, and I'm sure there are other ways, in which the government can, it's all its different strings that it pulls, and budgets that it controls, and certification requirements that it has, controls the number of MDs. All right, everybody, have a great, for me, it's rest of your night. It's really late here. It's almost, what is it? It's 10 to 11. I will see you all tomorrow. No, I won't see you tomorrow. Tomorrow I've got Madame Butterfly. So tomorrow we're going to Madame Butterfly. I might do a show on Sunday. although I'm doing a show in Hebrew on Sunday, so we'll see if I can do 2 shows in one night. I'll try to do something on Sunday. Monday, we're flying to Sevilla, in the south of Italy, in the south of Spain. It's a beautiful city, old part of the Moorish Empire. We're going to spend next week there. So from Monday through Friday, we're going to spend there. I'm going to try to do shows from Seville in the evening. I'm not sure I'll do one every night, but I'll try to do shows most nights. And so I guess if I don't see you Sunday, I'll see you on Monday from Seville. I'll try to do a show on Monday. Yeah. I'm looking forward to next week. I'm looking forward to seeing Seville. I was there a while back, a few years ago, and it was amazing. I will see you all. I will see you all very soon. Bye, everybody.